I'm very much wanting to get your take on something that is happening at the Justice Department and is happening in relation to James Comey and to Adam Schiff, and essentially the notion that, I mean, it's more than a notion, the idea that something has to be brought in terms of charges against all of these people who are clearly guilty in the view of the President of the United States. Not sure of what they're guilty, but I know they're guilty of something, is kind of his point. And if you won't do it as a prosecutor, he's already gotten rid of one, now hired another, I'll get another. And if you won't do it, I'll get another. And the newest prosecutor, I think, David Katz, has almost no experience as a prosecutor. I think she was an attorney associated with insurance.
Yeah, she was one of his attorneys down there in Florida. And, you know, for people who remember back that far, or, you know, read about it, learned about it in school, you know, there was the famous Saturday Night Massacre where President Nixon wanted to end the Watergate investigation. So he gave orders to his first attorney general, who was Archibald Cox, who said no and went back to teach at Harvard Law. And then the next one was Elliot Richardson, who said no. He was the deputy. He said no, and he walked. And then Robert Bork was third in line because he was the Solicitor General, the attorney in the Justice Department who argues before the U.S. Supreme Court. And Bork said he'd do it. And of course, that was very controversial. But those were people of gravitas. I mean, even Bork. This looks like really the slapdash thing where Trump is throwing anybody in there. The first U.S. attorney that he had for the Eastern District of Virginia, and they all have these strange names like the Central District of California. It's kind of hard to figure out where they are. The Eastern District of Virginia is the part of Virginia that's closest to Washington, D.C. Alexandria, Arlington, the Pentagon are in there. It's a big time judicial district because it's right by Washington, D.C. And this is a very esteemed Republican picked by Trump to be the U.S. attorney there. And he looked at this case for months. He looked at the case against Comey, and he looked at the case against the DA from New York. And you might wonder, well, how they got Comey because Comey lived there. How did they get the lady from New York for this mortgage fraud thing? Because she had helped her niece buy a house in the Eastern District of Virginia. So there was venue for both Comey and for the niece of the she's the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. He had a venue for both of them, this U.S. attorney. At least from the reporting, he thought it was a decent case on Comey. This is the reporting. He thought it was an absolutely made up, ridiculous case, the mortgage fraud. All these mortgage frauds turn out to be absolutely not crimes. I mean, they're not just not guilty, they're just not crimes. There's nothing to indict. So I think when Trump saw that he was going to not indict the Attorney General from New York, he got the vibe that this was an independent, Republican, Trump appointed, but an independent-minded, serious U.S. attorney. So he fired him. There's been back and forth, Mark. We resigned. He fired him. He fired him because he wouldn't do his bidding. And having put this lady in there without prosecutorial experience to do his bidding, it's a terrible day for the rule of law, and it's a bad day for James Comey because you have to predict that he's going to get indicted in the next few days because the statute of limitations runs on September 30. So that's why Trump keeps sending out tweets.
The statute of limitations.
Time is now.
Yeah.
He's not encouraging anybody to do anything, but he says, Comey, the time is now.
I mean, the reality is that this statute of limitations that you're talking about is related to what will likely be the thing that they try to press on, which is a perjury charge. And what's odd about that, David, and this is why I'm so glad I'm talking to you, I thought perjury, to actually charge someone with perjury, you'd have to have the proof, or at least the evidence that would lead to proof before a jury that they knew they were lying about something, that it has to be a knowing lie for it to be something that someone's perjured themselves over, right?
Perjury is hard to sustain. I mean, people think, well, it's any kind of lying on the stand, but no, it actually has elements. It's difficult to prove. But again, I think most people of good sense don't see this as a question of whether they can meet all the elements of perjury. This is nothing
Right.
but vindictiveness. This is a malicious prosecution.
By bringing the prosecution, David, I mean, you can screw up somebody's life to kind of have to deal with this in court.
Absolutely. And every conscientious prosecutor says, I'm screwing up someone's life if I'm wrong. Let's make absolutely sure that I'm right. That's why prosecutors, not just by their conscience, but also by rules, can only proceed in a case where they think that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, even though the grand jury technically can indict just based on probable cause. That's why it's so stunning when those grand juries don't indict at all, because they didn't even find probable cause. They didn't even find it was more likely than not that the person had committed a crime, and they figured that out without any defense attorney. But I just think that the grand jury, without someone there to tell Comey's side of the story, I think that they will make a presentation that the grand jurors won't go no true bill and run out of the grand jury room. I think that they will, by the sufficient majority of grand jurors, return an indictment. I just think that that's what's going to happen. They'll present a case that he testified in Congress within the last 5 years. He gave testimony that his previous testimony was still true. His previous testimony is from even further back and had to do with whether there were leaks during this investigation.
During that crossfire hurricane thing. Yeah, it was
it's complicated what exactly his perjury is supposed to be. But I've seen that it was something about the leaks. There's a whole thing where he has a friend from the U.S. Attorney's Office, because he's had these huge jobs. He got in the position to decide, because the Attorney General under Obama, she had to recuse herself because she'd gone to the plane and chatted with Clinton. She was so excited to meet him, so they said she should recuse herself. She was an honorable person. Even Trump's Attorney General recused my schmooze. I'm not doing anything. So she recused herself, which led Comey as the person to make the decision. That was why Comey was in the position to announce that case against Hillary Clinton, or that ongoing investigation that investigated uptick against Hillary Clinton like 10 or 12 days before the election. Hillary Clinton and Trump, which, along with Putin's efforts and the disinformation campaign from Russia, were the two things that really seemed to doom Hillary Clinton. Of course, people say, well, why shouldn't Trump be grateful to Comey? Comey did more to elect him in 2016 than any other person in the world.
That's what I think.
Except for Putin. But of course, Trump has a very short memory. And now he's all pissed off at Comey. And then Comey has given back some. He hasn't just gone and hidden off somewhere. He's participated in the public conversation, as he has every right to do. And Trump,
in the same way that John Bolton has, and these people, Schiff is a high-profile pushback on Trump, and as a result, he's targeted all of them. So you think that he will actually be able to produce an indictment against Comey, flimsy though it might be?
I think that's what's going to happen. I think Comey will have to hire lawyers. He'll have the best. I mean, what an honor to represent Comey. But even so, they bring the motions. They're going to argue selective prosecution. Now, selective prosecution, you have to prove that others in a similar situation to yours weren't charged. And of course, one of the hard things is to show that the situation was that similar. You know what I mean? The government's always got some story that they weren't quite similar. And someone as high profile as him, it's sort of imagine who's exactly similar to him. There's Bolton, who looks like he's also being selectively prosecuted. And I guess Bolton,
they're going to go for the retention of documents that were not authorized. This is their search warrant that they executed at his home and office. Apparently, they uncovered documents there. This is, again, the stuff that's leaked out. So they're going to go after different stuff with all these people, but it would appear that their cases are thin at best, and you end up with what is basically a nuisance prosecution, but the nuisance can be significant. That's kind of what I was getting at before when I was asking you about it.
Well, Trump's going to have two huge problems of his own making. One, in the record to fight Comey's motion that he's being selectively prosecuted and picked out only because of his political beliefs and his participation in the public discourse. Trump would like to have, there are 5 Republicans that are in the same situation, 5 of my allies who are in the same situation. But of course, there are no allies of Trump's that are in the same situation. For his own allies, it's been complete forgiveness. I start, just if I can for a moment, with Homan, the head of ICE. The head of ICE, it is undisputed, took a bag with $50,000 cash in it. This man is now the head of ICE, sicking all of these unmasked people on groups of poor working people all over the country. This maniac who says that he won't follow court orders and all of the other outrageous things that he says. You know, when Orban and Chavez in Venezuela and Turkey, I think even some of the famous fascists, when they came to power, they didn't make statements like this Homan did. They said, we're going to go out of our way to obey the law. We believe in the rule of law. You only have the anomaly of this guy saying, we don't care what courts do. We're going to do what we want. It's just unbelievable. Well, it turns out this good talking, law abiding supposed guy, back in September of 2024, the FBI was running an investigation, and some informant told them, you know, we think that you might get somewhere approaching Homan because we think Homan would take a bribe. So the FBI set up a sting, pretended to be businessmen, and they offered Homan a $50,000 bribe, which Homan took in a paper bag in cash money. Now the administration isn't even defending that he didn't take the bag. They aren't even defending that he didn't take the $50,000. This is rich. He was entrapped. Now, I'm a criminal defense attorney. Okay, the surest way to have the prosecutors roll their eyes is to say that your client was entrapped. But that's Trump's story. This man was entrapped. Somehow he was bamboozled. He was induced by whatever. Entrapment. That's his defense. No dispute that this man took back in September a bag with $50,000 as part of a sting about bribery. And the aim of the bribery was allegedly that he would get good contracts with the government to hold detainees, people who were facing deportation. And of course, billions of dollars have been distributed since he and Trump got in there. Billions of dollars. So many of these prisons are private prisons. They're making a huge profit off this immense human suffering of the would-be deportees. Anyway, so the second thing, Mark, can I just come back to this? Okay, so the second thing that Trump would like to have, besides some allies who find themselves in the same situation as Bolton and Comey, so he can say, what do you mean it's just my enemies in public speech? No, some of my allies are. Well, none of his allies are having any trouble. Look at Homan as exhibit number one. And the second thing that he'd like to have is a clean record where he hadn't made statements. He'd say, I'm indifferent to what happens. Well, of course, Trump is not indifferent. You look at the process by which this has happened. He's written tweets. Can he talk to somebody? I mean, for a guy who's often compared to a mafioso, didn't he learn that you don't put it down in Truth Social? He says, indict this guy. This guy's terrible. This guy's a criminal. And the people that he writes to people in law enforcement and his administration that they're criminals, that they ought to be indicted, that they ought to be in jail. Lo and behold, those are the people who are about to be searched or were searched like Bolton, and who, unfortunately, I believe, are about to be indicted like Comey. I don't think it could have gotten to this level if Comey weren't about to get indicted.
What it points up to me, what you've just talked about in that whole run, is it points out that you really need a cop on the beat. And if all the cops on the beat have been corrupted and they're all devoted loyalists to the king, then you don't have a cop on the beat anymore. And so justice isn't meted out in any kind of fair way, and you end up where we are. And I'm so glad you mentioned the private prisons, the private detention facilities run by private companies. That was what this bribe was about. It was about contractors who, again, they weren't real contractors, they were FBI agents, but paying off Homan in this $50,000 cash bribe in a bag at a Cava restaurant. And the idea is that Homan had guaranteed that they'd get some contracts. And now you look at these private facilities, these detention centers, they're overrun, they're understaffed, they're handled in the same chaotic way that everything's being handled in this administration in so many ways, with the incompetence and disregard for health, for medicine. And they lose a 39-year-old who we covered it in hour one, who died. And he's a DACA recipient, been here since he was 4 years old, okay? And he died. And it was a very treatable condition he had. But he ends up dying, 39. Okay, this is again a casualty, literally, of the disregard that Homan has, and so these private prison operators have for those who are inside.
it's shameful that we didn't do something to, at the very least, help the dreamers, the DACA recipients. I told you I had the first dreamer that the LA Times called him Tony's American Dream. And from Tony's American Dream, all the time, it became the Dreamers. And so I've been close to this issue for a long time. And it's just really remarkable that the parties couldn't get together and at least do this, that the Republicans wouldn't at least do this with the Democrats.
Yeah, the percentages of those who have gone on to college, who are really productive members of society among that DACA group, overwhelming. I mean, far outpace anything with the general population of those who are U.S. citizens. I want to ask you about the Tylenol thing, because the Tylenol thing at the time, I thought, wow, they're making this announcement. There's no data to back it up. And Trump is even riffing about Cuba and the Amish, and it was totally made up. It's completely without any fact. And I said on the air here, I feel like there's a legal exposure here, legal exposure that the government may have, because Tylenol may, if they suffer any damages as a result of this announcement, and then the attendant, and I'll get to in a moment, lawsuits that may follow, and there have been a bunch of them now, they may be able to clap back on the government and say, hey, you guys made this announcement. It caused us real damage, and there has to be some kind of adjudication of a civil nature between us. And now Tylenol, the makers of Tylenol, reportedly preparing for this glut of lawsuits after this baseless warning about the link to acetaminophen and to autism. Can you speak to I'm glad we're speaking again, because I'm curious about the legal side of it. Without any data, they make a statement like this. What are the legal exposures associated with it?
Well, this reminds me a little bit of the Dominion voting. And when you're talking about some company that's had its brand tarnished this much, they're going to keep pursuing it. Obviously, politically and philosophically, so many people in America want there to be a calling to account, and of what's happened just already in these 9 months of Trump, all the violations of the law, all the things that need to be undone and remedied. But when you're a huge corporation, you are definitely going to keep fighting for a redress because their stock went down. Then I think Tylenol stock went back up. I think the market generally thought this is BS. They thought this is not even going to affect people taking Tylenol. Tylenol is such a well-established brand, and you see these clowns up there. And then I think afterwards, Dr. Oz repudiated it or repudiated the research. An announcement this important, if you're a health official like Dr. Oz and you don't agree with this charade that just happened, you better resign. I mean, I assume Dr. Oz is planning to resign, or they're going to twist his arm and have him retract that statement. But so I think that in the short term, I think Tylenol will have more problems. I mean, the stock is certainly not going to boom. This is not a great announcement. I think they'll do okay. But the class action plaintiffs, the people who sue them, will try to piggyback on this. Now the federal government has come out. It's not just the president. They had the FDA issue some statement which is consistent. So now there's a promulgated FDA statement, Mark, that says the same. I think malarkey. Bring a good expression back from Biden. Bring this old malarkey, to the fore. But that's not how it's going to be presented by the class action plaintiffs. They're going to say now there's a directive, there's a promulgated rule. We want to add to the class action, this and that. And Trump's position is based on a Harvard researcher. He's the head of the Harvard office.
The Harvard School of Public Health, Dean Andrea A. Baccarelli. He got $150,000 to testify against Tylenol's manufacturer in 2023, 2 years before he published the research used by the administration in that announcement linking the drug to autism. It's crazy. I mean, it was bought and paid for research.
Now, let me just say this, okay? First of all, Trump is being totally disingenuous because this was presented to the district judge, the trial judge, who had what they call multi-district litigation. All these cases against Tylenol making this autism claim, you don't want to have them in 100 different courtrooms. So cases like that get consolidated in front of one judge. So the judge that they were consolidated in front of, she heard all of this, and she said, you didn't get to first base. I'm granting summary judgment. You didn't get to first base. That's not to say that what this professor said was false. It's not to say that it was, in the expression used with Comey, perjury. I'm not saying it's perjury or that it was false. But certainly you would think if you were the president and you were going to rely on it as being definitive, you might point out that the district judge who heard this, had this presented, was not persuaded that there was a causal link. The whole thing is there really a causal link? And there's so many different ways to explain. Let me just give you one example. Maybe the women who are having really difficult childbirth and having pain and are taking Tylenol, maybe it's something about why they're having difficulty, right? With their pregnancy, that correlates with autism. It doesn't correlate that they took, palliative, they took the pill, right? That eased whatever was happening with them. You have to look at what was happening to them. And then there's a whole thing of genetics. Everyone knows that there's a genetics link between, getting autism. There's a genetic reason for why many kids that get autism. So the idea that there's a causal link was not established, Mark, by any of this research, but they're going to try to hang this around the head. The plaintiff's lawyers are around Tylenol's head. Tylenol's got great lawyers. They'll fight back. And yes, I think at some point Tylenol will try to seek its remedy against the government. But generally speaking, the fact that the government, think about it, that's what everybody would do in the environmental field. Everybody in the environmental field that gets cost a lot of money by a government pronouncement or an EPA announcement would love to sue the president and the EPA. Your question raises, because there's such a dearth of evidence, is that a basis for filing? And I would have to see. I mean, that I think has to play out. How deep was the dearth of evidence? How little was the little they had? They appear to have almost nothing. They seem to have that not accepted by the court, that unpersuasive for the court.
Exactly, not accepted by the court.
Harvard expert. The very last thing, because I want to clear the Harvard expert just for a minute. This is what these guys do. These guys do become expert witnesses. He got $700 an hour. Some of these lawyers are running around charging $1,500 an hour now. He's a Harvard, professor. He's getting $700 an hour. He had however many hours that is to come up to 150,000. I'm sure the other side had experts to say the opposite, and I'm sure they got well remunerated too, Mark.
Yeah, I'll give you that just because he's a paid special witness, it doesn't mean that what he is witnessing and what he's testifying to is fraud at all or fraudulent. But when I was reading about these studies, I guess they didn't correct for siblings. They didn't correct. I mean, it's a very small group. I mean, it's like 900 people. Meantime, on the other side, you have 2.5 million people that they checked out in terms of the correlative for Tylenol and autism, and they couldn't find no data to support this specious argument. So I'm sorry. I mean, I've yet to see anything that's convincing in this way. And to just see Trump, hey, we've solved autism. We've solved the whole thing. I mean, that's kind of what he wants. He just wants to make an announcement,
I think one thing they're going to look at is whether Kennedy Jr., whether he has a financial stake in a lot of these findings and so forth. And he may end up getting sued personally, not just in his institutional capacity, but sued personally, because I think their theory may be that, this is just another scam. And one of the great ways, I mean, every scammer's dream would be to have a government job that they could use to help perpetrate the scam. And I think they're just going to come around to that kind of a theory on him, and he's going to get sued left, right, and center.
Here it is. A 2024 study in the Journal of the American Medical Association involved 2.5 million children born in Sweden and controlled for compounds across these millions of samples. The research determined that there was no causal relationship between acetaminophen consumption and autism. So, I mean, again, that's in 2024. It's not like an ancient study. And, autism was around and predated Tylenol by decades. So it's so specious, and yet it can do so much damage too. I mean, I know so many parents who have kids who are on the spectrum. On the spectrum is one thing, but some are profoundly autistic, you know what I mean? And it's heartbreaking, and they'd like real research instead of this performative nonsense that these guys are involved in.
Mark, you pronounced that so well. The name of the
acetaminophen, commonly known as Tylenol.
So I will leave you with this, David, because we're kind of out of time. But Democrats are going after law firms that are doing free work for Trump. and they're warning of law breaking. They may not get far in their demands for details, but key Democrats are laying the groundwork for full-blown investigations when they're back in the majority. In letters to 3 prominent law firms that capitulated to Trump's threats earlier this year by agreeing to provide him with pro bono services in exchange for him not attacking their businesses, Democrats demand specifics on the scope and duration of services that these firms are currently carrying out for Trump's pet causes. Specifically, their letters are coming in response to this New York Times report that Paul Weiss and Kirkland Ellis, 2 huge firms, are providing free legal services on a range of matters to the Commerce Department. A third law firm, and this is wild, Skadden Arps, is also reporting work for the Commerce Department. It's unclear whether this firm is being paid or is working for free. And again, it was, I believe, somebody, a Democrat, a high-profile Democrat, who said, you could be violating the law by providing legal services to the Commerce Department without compensation. So maybe you can speak to this. I mean, these are very high-profile law firms, first of all, aren't they, David?
These are 3 of the law firms that made a show of not fighting the government. These were 3 of the 10 largest law firms in America that kind of rolled over and said, we'll play ball and we'll give you a lot of pro bono services. Paul Weiss was a surprising one. Paul Weiss was sort of known as a liberal law firm, fight the establishment. And of course, they just rolled over to the establishment. Skadden Arps was very, very famous. It was the takeover law firm when one corporation would take over another. And they got to be very famous in the 70s and 80s. And then they just became a major law firm based on these takeovers. And this Kirkland and Ellis, I think, is one of the richest firms in the country, most money per partner. I mean, millions of dollars per partner. A lot of people came to the administration from there. That Jeffrey Clark, he was from Kirkland and Ellis, the one who was going to vault over the other top
Sure.
officials in the Justice Department. I think some of
the
those
one who's going to become Attorney General, yeah.
Yeah, just issue the statement, and my Republican Congress members will take it from there.
Right,
Trump's
it doesn't actually have to be anything going on.
And this Jeffrey Clark from Skadden Arps, from Kirkland and Ellis. I said that wrong. This Jeffrey Clark from Kirkland and Ellis, he's in trouble. Ironically, some of the lawyers that he was vaulting over, would have vaulted over, were also from Kirkland and Ellis. It is a dyed-in-the-wool Republican firm. And let me tell you another problem besides what they call the Anti-Deficiency Act, which is why on earth the Commerce Department, billions of dollars, part of the government. Why does it need pro bono work? It's got its own lawyers. Are they learning secrets in there? What is the motivation really of those firms to get involved in that kind of commerce work? So that's certainly something to question. There may be nothing untoward, but it's certainly something to question. The Democrats are. But let me just one more minute on this pro bono thing. We have a case right out here in Los Angeles brought by this Kirkland and Ellis. And they have touted this, it's the biggest pro bono thing in the world. Oh, they care about society so much. They're helping society, this pro bono thing. And the case is against the schools out here. And of course, the schools are a favorite target of right-wingers and right-wing law firms. And the argument is that they didn't accommodate the pandemic. They didn't have the remote learning done right. They have to have more tutoring. They have to institute this program and that program. And you kind of think to yourself, how does some hotshot millions of dollars per partner law firm know anything about the public education system? Do any of those partners send their kids to the public education system? And so then this judge threw the case out, right? And then they went to the Court of Appeals, this huge firm, and they got the case reinstated. And now they've settled with the Board of Education, whoever runs the schools out here. They finally settled, and some judge is going to determine whether it's a fair settlement, and that's down the road. And people get interested in that case certainly might want to comment on whether it's a fair settlement. The outcome of it is that the taxpayers here in LA, right, we had to pay millions and millions of dollars for that school district to defend itself against Kirkland and Ellis and that huge law firm. Meanwhile, Kirkland and Ellis says, we're not asking any fees. See the halo? We're not asking any fees at all. It's pro bono. Is this one they're handing to Trump? Is this part of the pro bono thing? Is this the kind of pro bono that we're going to get all over the country, Mark? That they're going to fight the schools, they're going to fight these institutions. They said they were going to do 3 things. They were going to help the vets. Certainly this case out here, I don't know how they're helping the vets. They're going to do something about anti-Semitism. I don't think that has reared its ugly head in this case, although they try to have it rear its ugly head all over the place.
Yeah, they can find it where they want.
Right. Don't seem anti-Semitic. And I forget what the third one was, but we need to go through carefully. And I think it's good that the Democrats are starting to do that. There'll be a huge calling to account, because it's not just that they didn't get disfavored, Mark. It's that what we're looking for is, how did they get favored? How did they get sweetheart deals? How did their clients get to the head of the line or get some benefit? And of course, the Democrats want to look at Kirkland and Ellis, Paul Weiss, and Skadden Arps. We'll hear a lot more about all those firms, I think, down the road.
It's really, it's fascinating. And I'm just extorting this kind of service from these legal institutions. It's just of a kind. It's part of the strategy, between that shakedown of media and now really his own Justice Department. It's an extraordinary thing. It's all of, it's all of Project 2025. Yeah.
Can you award me a Katsadamas, one win for Jimmy Kimmel? Back
Albert, how about the Katsadamas? Yeah, I think it was impressive. The declaration that Jimmy would be back on within a week, and he was.
And that the Brooklyn show would go on. You can buy a ticket. I think you may have to stand in line or join something, but you can see him in Brooklyn next week.
Yeah.
Jimmy
and then
Kimmel.
There's a second Katsadamas caricature.
I got it, but I don't want to go over and clunkily put it in front.
No. We'll make sure we get it, that we keep it in the roster.
I sent it to you guys, and the very last thing, Mark, is and we can do this one next week, but I really want to talk about the Humphreys Executor. Well, that's a preview of coming attractions. What a tease.
What a
Humphreys
tease.
Executor.
Yeah.
But that's the case which is so in the news right now and in people's minds. Everyone's talking about it. At lunch the other day, had lunch with some people. Are they really going to rule that there are no administrative agencies? Because that's where they could potentially go if they allow Trump to remove the Democrats on those commissions, even though Congress said there have to be Democrats on those commissions. The only justification, or the likely justification, would seem to be because those commissions have no right to exist at all. So
you're talking about the firing of the FTC commissioner? Is that part of that? Or?
FTC. Okay. There's three different ones. There's a merits board one, and I have an interesting thought on it. So let's hold that for next week.
All right, we'll put that. We'll hold it in abeyance, as is said. David, thank you. We'll look for you. Where's your next?
Oh, there's the one. There's the one by my friend.
Yeah, I love it.
By my friend at Disney. Isn't that fantastic?
I love it. That's a great shot of Katsadamas in full prediction mode. Where's your next television appearance or radio appearance?
News Nation in about a half an hour.
Oh, News Nation. All
this
right.
is crazy. I used to think, God, Mark works so hard in media. I'm having like a Mark Thompson day.
Yeah, you're busier than I am. I love it. Everybody wants you. The rehearsal's over.
Mark,
now the real stuff on News Nation.
Tim and Mark, it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not. David, we'll see you next week, and thank you. David Katz, everybody.
Anyone who gets News Nation, it's on in a half an hour, and it's me and Gerardo. I better say
Geraldo.
Right.
Wow.
Geraldo again.
Yeah, look at you. You and Geraldo. It's a thing. Let's go on the road. David Katz and Geraldo. I love it.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.